some of the people that are here today are people that I have recently met that are instrumental in our Emma Big Bear talk today. And some of our archaeological things, and the man is sitting in the front row, and Doug didn't expect it, but Doug's important. And I want to mention Doug because he's an instrumental man. In fact, I will very secretly say this, that he is in possession of things that other people lust for, namely archaeological sites that are important to the state of Iowa. So that's an inside joke or inside place, but it's very important. And some of the things that I want to give him credit as well because he's very good at this. I'm going to be talking about Emma Big Bear. The French had a habit of, when they were there, of course they came to Canada, for what we call French Canada, and they came to that area, and they came out here, out along the Great Lakes, and they ended up in that area around Green Bay, and they found a group of Native Americans there that they ended up calling the Winnebagos, partly because they lived on Lake Winnebago. That's where they found them. They found them on Lake Winnebago, and they called them Winnebagos, but they also had another less, shall we say, less polite name. They called them Pluons, which the French mean, if any of you speak French, you'll know the smelly ones. And the reason that they were called Pluons, or the smelly ones, was because they were beside Lake Winnebago, and it had all of the, in the summertime, especially with the water plants and all of that, it was not a pleasant place to live a lot of times. Well, they were there, and that's the original place in that area on the east side of Wisconsin. Well, their land became desirable as people started moving out from the east part. They were one of the tribes that we have to move, we have to get rid of, we have to do something with. And so there were a number of tribes in Wisconsin, and of course you'll remember hearing about the Battle of Bad Axe with the Black Hawk and Indian War and all of that. The Ho-Chunk were part of that as well. But what happened finally was that the federal government, in its wonderful wisdom, decided that we had to do something with Iowa now because we have some tribal problems in Iowa. The Sioux were in the north, the Sac and Fox were in the south, and we have this group of Ho-Chunk, Winnebago in Wisconsin. We've got to do something now. And we've got to prevent, because the Sioux would raid the Sac and Fox in Iowa because of hunting grounds and so on. They would come down into Iowa, into this area of Iowa in a special way, and raid each other and so on. So the government said, we got to do something about this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have what we call the neutral line. And we're going to run it from over there by Upper Iowa River, and we're going to run it right straight over to, we're going to run it along the north part of the boundary of the state of Iowa to around Charles City. And they're going to have that line, and they have to stay on the Sioux have to stay north of the line, the Sac and Fox have to stay south of the line. What you going to do? I'll cross the line, huh? What you going to do? I crossed that line. Well, they decided that wasn't working. So they said, we've got to do something else. So what they did was they created now a neutral zone, or the neutral ground. They've got that lovely line, see? We're going to have 20 miles north of the line, and 20 miles south of the line is kind of like no man's territory, okay? You can't be in there. That's a boundary between the Sioux to the north and the Sac and Fox to the south. Well, okay, we'll see if that works. But you know something? We got these Ho-Chunk, and we got to do something with them. You know, they're kind of messy. They've been helping with the mining. There was a lot of mining in Wisconsin. They did a lot of lead mining and so on in Wisconsin. But you know something? Let's take and do this. Let's take and put the Ho-Chunk, the Winnebago, in the neutral zone or in the neutral ground. let's take and go right straight up the Turkey River and put these Ho-Chunk right up the Turkey River. That's basically from the Turkey, the mouth of the Turkey, to about Charles City or so, is that neutral, and 20 miles either side of the line. Let's do it. Well, you know, every treaty that the United States government ever made with a Native American, they've broken, plain and simple. There's a rock over here in Fremont Township, Fayette County, Section 7, that is the loci for no less than 4 United States treaties with Native Americans. That one rock is the loci for all of those treaties. So, you know, we've got all of this stuff going on here. So, all right, we know this is happening, but let's take and move now the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin and put them along in the neutral zone, the neutral ground, up the Turkey River, which they did. About 2,600 Ho-Chunk forcibly were moved, folks, were moved from Wisconsin by federal troops for the most part, across the Mississippi River, which in those days didn't have all the locks and dams in it, so it was, you know, a lot of places you could wade almost across off the Mississippi. So they brought them across the Mississippi and up the Turkey River. 13 villages of Ho-Chunk were placed from the mouth of the Turkey River all the way up to a little town called Waucoma. Waucoma was the last one of the villages, was up in Waucoma. So from the mouth of the Turkey River up to Waucoma, there were 13 villages along there, over 2,600 different people in that area. A large number. All right, that's fine. We built the Indian school. Yes, we have to have a school for those little children. You know, we got to make them good little white boys and girls, and we got to make them little Americans. You know, we got to do this. So we're going to put an Indian school up there, 3 miles north of St. Lucas, on what is now today the John Kennan Farm. The federal government has an Indian school. 269 Indian children went to school there. There were 5 huge fields to teach them how to cultivate, the boys to teach them how to farm. So they had all these fields to teach the boys how to farm. There, where John Kennan lives on 105th Street, up there north of St. Lucas. So you had an Indian school where they boarded the kids. They had blacksmith shops. They had dressmaking shops. They had all sorts of little places along there. It basically covered a place just east of on his farmstead where he lives. That was all full, and all the fields around it were full to teach them how to farm properly. Okay, that was 1840. Okay, by 1848, 1849, we got to do something with this. The land is too valuable, and we're going to have to do something about all of this stuff. So the federal government, in its wonderful wisdom, decides to move all of them to Long Prairie, Minnesota, forcibly. And so they brought wagons, and they brought something like 500 wagons, umpteen herds, a large herd of cattle, and they forcibly moved them out of around Fort Atkinson, which was the site of the dragoons, where the dragoons were located, to kind of keep that area quiet. They actually forcibly moved them from north of St. Lucas and all the way up the Turkey River, took all of the villages and moved them up to Long Prairie, Minnesota. Well, they got them up to Long Prairie, Minnesota, and they were there for a little while, and guess what? They put them with all their enemies. You know, I mean, you know, talk about the inimitable wisdom of the government. They put them with everybody they didn't get along with. So you pack them up there, all of a sudden, time to move again. And so they picked up a large portion of the Ho-Chunk and moved them to a place called Winnebago, Nebraska. Do you know where Winnebago, Nebraska is? Right across the Missouri River is Winnebago, Nebraska. So they put a bunch there, and then they said, well, we're gonna do something, we gotta move them a little bit more. So they took them all the way down into Oklahoma. So the people that originally started out in Wisconsin, around, you know, and around that Green Bay area of Wisconsin, to Iowa, to all the way up the Turkey River, now and starting to try to educate them. And then we move them further into Minnesota with everybody that they didn't like, and then move them to Nebraska, and then finally move them down into Oklahoma, the land of reservations. I had it very interesting. The state of Iowa has never had a reservation. What is in Tama, Iowa, is a settlement. They bought their own land. The Meskwaki, when they wanted to come back to Iowa to live, they bought that land they're on in Tama. They bought it. So it's not a reservation. It's a settlement. So all these other ones were on reservations. Well, enter Emma Big Bear. Emma Big Bear's father was a chief of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Herding human beings is like herding cats. You know, ever tried to herd cats? I got 12 of them on my front porch. You know what that's like? I know. And so they're like cats. If they can slip away and hide, they will. Oh, I like you. You're a nice girl. You come with me, we stay here. Okay. And you stayed. A lot of people, they were moved, but there was an old story about Popopakina that said to his people, tonight, move, go someplace, leave. They're coming after us tomorrow. We want to find an empty village. And in the morning, when the United States government and all of its regalia came, they found nobody in the village. The village was completely empty. And they just went into the bushes. Okay, went into the bushes. Emma Big Bear is one of those that family made its way back to Wisconsin again. Okay, well, one of those, or were lucky enough to have been able to escape the federal government coming in and packing them up and moving them out. And so Emma Big Bear's father was Chief Big Bear of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And they came out of around Toma, Wisconsin. If you know where Toma is, you have an idea where Toma, Wisconsin is. They came from that Toma area. She was born in Toma, Chief Big Bear, and Blue Wing was her mother. She was born there, but her father had a problem. As many people of indigenous backgrounds have, they have sometimes trouble with alcohol and drugs due to white man's wonderful, inimitable way of control. Read my tea garden in the paper this week. You'll find out what I mean. And so her father and mother parted. She was raised basically by her mother, was sent off to Indian school a little bit so that she was able to be conversant in the English language and a little bit of English background. But Emma was there. They had Wisconsin. She was born in 1869. Now, folks, I used to sit on the blanket that Emma was sitting on when she was making baskets, making beadwork. I'm 76, and I remember. Anyway, her father had, been a problem. Mother went out to Nebraska to be with other people of their background, had gone to see some other people of their background, and had met someone out there. Emma had quite an early life. I mean, she was educated in one of the Indian schools, but with her father being alcoholic and so on, there was a real problem. She was raised basically with her mother for the most part. When she did go out to visit Nebraska, she went to be with the community in Nebraska in Winnebago. Well, there was this little guy that was there, another ho-chunk, that took a liking to Emma. And his name was William Henry Holt. So he looked and saw Emma different times. One time he was out there and he met her at the train and told her, "Get in the buggy, I want to marry you." And so she got into the buggy and they came back from Winnebago, Nebraska, all the way to McGregor, Iowa, with a horse and a buggy. Quite a trip, all the way back. And then settled near a place called, do you know where Waukon Junction is? All right, Waukon Junction is where William Henry Holt and Emma Big Bear made their site of living. They had a wickiup or a wigwam there. They lived back in that area by Waukon Junction, second coulee north of Waukon Junction. Now, you have to understand that those valleys in Wisconsin and Iowa still take the name coulee. We still talk about those valleys are still referred to as coulees. So it is the second coulee north of Waukon Junction. Emma Big Bear and William Henry Holt made their home. What did Emma do? Emma made baskets for a living. Now, why baskets? Every tribe has its own characteristic thing they like to do, okay? You'll get some of the Chippewas and so on, we do a lot of beadwork. Or they'll do some of them will do pottery. You know, get in the desert Southwest and they'll do pottery, things like this, okay? That's their claim to fame. Other ones will weave rugs. What I did, folks, is I brought a number of different tribes do different things. And so to represent all of the Native American tribes as much as I could, I would bring rugs or pottery. I would bring sand paintings, here the desert Southwest, where the Navajo do sand paintings. So I do things like that to take and kind of represent it. But Ho-Chunk are basket makers. They lived in Wisconsin and they had access to something that now is becoming, again, probably end up extinct, black ash. Green ash are all dying now. Black ash are also susceptible to the emerald ash borer. And so pretty soon, these are all made out of black ash, okay? I'll talk about that in a little bit more, but she made baskets, she and William Henry Holt. He would work on handles, but what you do is this. You take a black ash, you cut it down, you peel the bark off, and you take a hammer or a maul or whatever else and start beating the length of the log. And then you get down to the end and you stick your knife or so on and peel the growth ring off. And then you beat it again and peel the next growth ring off. And then you beat it again and peel the next growth ring off, and gradually your log is going to get smaller and smaller until you start out with another ash log. And you beat it the same way until you get all of these. Each and every one of these bands that make up the parts of the basket are all made out of the growth rings of black ash trees. And so they had black ash in Wisconsin, and so they decided that's a real thing for them. They made all types of baskets. You know, here's just an ornamental kind of thing, you know. Put fruit in it, maybe put your yarn in it, or your needlework, something like that. You have them that, you know, they made that are like, you know, picnic basket types of things, but I'm going to go into that in a little bit. I mean, so she made baskets for a living. And she and William Henry Holt lived back there in that second coulee north of Walk-On Junction, and that's where they made baskets. And in the morning, she would ride there was a kind of a guy that used to run a tavern or something downtown McGregor, and she would ride in his boat, and she'd pack up all of her baskets onto the boat. She'd ride down, he'd let her off. She'd go down to, there was an old hotel in Marquette, and she'd sit on the front porch of this old motel and hotel and sell baskets. And all made out of black ash, and different kinds, different styles of baskets, whatever seemed to fit the fancy of the people or the time. She would also do beadwork. Now, I can tell, I'll talk about them in a little bit, about a black ash basket. I can tell you more about that than I can about beadwork, because the beadwork, it doesn't have as many characteristics as you do when it comes to making a basket. You know, you may have different colors of beads that they use. I've got some that are made up of beads that are very old beads that I know she made the little necklaces. She used to make little necklaces and things like that, okay? Used to make little necklaces. I've got some things over here that I put out. Look in here, you can see the kinds of things. There is also, and I'll get to it in a little bit, a piece that a friend of mine made. I said to you that the Ho-Chunk didn't all run away. Emma was there. Emma lived in that coulee. But she also went other places. And one of her favorite places to hang out was in Festina. And she would hang out by the smallest church in Festina with Vera Schneeberger. And she and Vera and all the rest of them were all good friends. And so if you know some of the Longkricks, if you know Helen Longkrick or Ruth Pavlovic, they used to play with Emma's daughter. They used to play together, and she would make baskets at the smallest church in Festina or in that area. She'd get on the train and come up to Conover. If some of you know that place is Conover, outside up by Kelmer, they'd pick her up there and bring her back to Festina. They also had a wigwam down there where they lived sometimes, and William Henry Holt would come along. Emma was born in, like I said, in 1869. But she and William Henry Holt were not exactly children when they got married. And they only had one daughter. And I knew I was correct, because they used to say Emmeline. No, her real name, and here comes a lady that knows it too, her real name was Bertha Emmeline. I was sitting with Connie, the lady that just came in the pink. I was sitting there with Connie and Rosetta, the one behind her, sitting there one day, and I said, Bertha Emmeline, and the old Ho-Chunk lady said, yeah, you're right, you got it right. It was Bertha Emmeline. And I said, well, Emmeline is also spelled E-M-I-L-I-N-E. You're right. You know, so there are names that are associated with people. She is Bertha Emmeline. She died of tuberculosis during the Second World War. Her husband, she had married, never had a family that we know of. She had married another member of the community around Waukon. Now, Waukon, Iowa, Waukon is named after an Indian, Chief Waukon. And of course, I was with them. Some of you were with me when we were all down there when Prosper Waukon was here this summer. Anybody with me at Prosper when we were with Prosper Waukon? I thought one of you was with me. We were all, were you there when Prosper Waukon was here? Yes. That's what I thought. I knew you had, I knew there was somebody. I wasn't totally crazy. I knew there was somebody else with me. When Prosper Waukon and all of those were there. She had no children. She was married to another family that's up around Waukon, and their name was Big Soldier. There still are big soldiers in the telephone book in Wakan as I remember it, I think. There are still big soldier names are in there. She married a big soldier. He was in the service in World War II, and she died of tuberculosis here while he was fighting World War II. So that's what we know of her, okay? She died long before Emma did. Her husband, William Henry Holt, fell in the water, getting water out of the Mississippi River. He was getting water to take back to the wigwam, fell in the water, and ended up with pneumonia. After that, whether he contracted it or how he got it, but anyway, he had fallen into the water, and they had to pull him out, and it wasn't long, and he died from pneumonia. And we hauled him back to Wisconsin, or to Nebraska to be buried. You're buried where your family origin happens to be. He had come from Nebraska with that Nebraska community of Ho-Chunk that were out there, and he was buried with them there. So they carried the body back, and they put it in, and it was in the 1940s. Wasn't long after that, and Bertha Emmeline died, leaving Emma alone. Emma lived in various places after the death of family and all of that. She lived in all sorts of little shack-like things along the Mississippi. If any of you remember, she had a little place one time in McGregor. She had a place in Marquette. She had a place that actually her family owned right there when she died. That's Rosetta Holverson. And she lived there during the last years of her life before she finally succumbed. But she was born in 1869. She died in 1968. She was 99 years old when she died, as far as we know. We're just never quite sure. You know, when indigenous peoples and so on, or anyone that live in a rural area that you didn't always write down the birth and death certificates the way they always were, you sometimes weren't always correct, that's what would happen. So Emma lived to be 100 years old, basically. When I was a little boy, I will tell you the story why I have always been interested in Emma Big Bear. My family came, I'm first generation American on my dad's side. My dad came from Norway with his two older brothers and my grandparents. The rest of the family had either come earlier or some stayed back in the old country. And so jag kan snacka lite norsk, you know? It's that kind of thing that you learn. But when my family came here, they came in the 1920s and they went back to where the rest of the family were around this wonderful town called Gunder, you know, where it is then, near Elgin and Gunder and St. Olaf and all of that kind of stuff, you know. Well, they weren't so terribly well received, if you want to put it bluntly. And there wasn't really any place for them. So two of the Landsgaard families, George Landsgaard and Rosina Landsgaard, and Vebjörn, my grandpa, and Olga, my grandmother, and my dad, Easton, and Gunnar, and Ola, decided they were going to go up to Alamaky County. Guess who they went to live with? Ho-Chunk. There were Ho-Chunk in the area. They went around Wakan Junction, and in that area around Wakan and Churchtown and all of that. And my grandparents lived with the Ho-Chunk. So when my aunt was ready to be born, my dad's sister was ready to be born, the Ho-Chunk were close enough friends that my aunt was named after one of the Decoras, one of the Ho-Chunk families. And none of you were, I have to watch it. Some people know me too well. I was with Rosetta back there. Rod, Randy, I don't think it was you, but Connie was there, and Emma's nieces came to be there and another old man.
It was Roger.
Roger, okay. And we were all there together, and I told a story about my family, my aunt being Violet Ornelia, and the face lit up, and the old man started scribbling something down, one of my address, and he sent me a picture of spoon decora. I gave 2 features. One I gave to Rosetta, and one I kept myself, of spoon decora. He knew the family that our family associated with and were associated with up there. So when I grew up, they all knew Emma. And every time my dad would go to the river, we'd go to the river, where's Emma? Where's Emma? Where's Emma? We got to find Emma. Where's Emma? Where's Emma? And so we'd go around to every place where she used to habit, you know, along the river or something, different places. And I can remember sitting down next to her on a blanket as she was doing beadwork and so on as a little boy. So when I talk about her, I knew her personally. There was no getting around it. I was with her. I was with her as a little boy and had an association with her as a child. So it makes it kind of important for me, because when you know the family, when you know the people, you can relate to it a lot better. Like, I know this man, or at least I think I know this man. And that one too. I mean, where's she go? I know her genealogy too well. And then so, but what I'm saying is, you know people like that, you can associate with them. And you know how to deal with them, where they're coming from. Some things about how do you tell an Emma basket? Well, Emma made some of the finest baskets that any Ho-Chunk ever made. There are some other fine ones out there. But Emma, for around here, made them, and everybody says, is it an Emma basket? Is it an Emma basket? Well, there's ways that you sometimes can tell. And one of the biggest ways that you can sometimes tell an Emma basket, number one, it has to be black ash. But the other thing is that always her baskets always were, what do we say, ergonomically fitted right? Always perfectly balanced. Okay? Always perfectly balanced. Another thing about him. Look at the bottom. Is it a herringbone? It's a herringbone, isn't it? Isn't that a herringbone pattern on the bottom of that thing? No, that's a regular one. Where's the other one here? I'll give you a herringbone. How about a herringbone? Isn't that a herringbone on the bottom of it? Looks kind of herringbone-ish. Okay, that's another one. And a bigger basket tends to be herringbone. The smaller ones tend to be sometimes just straight across, okay? So that's one of the things, they're ergonomically just really on, okay? Doesn't make any difference which one you pick up, it always ends up that way. The other thing about them is there is a patina that is like no other patina. How did they get it smooth? What did they used to use when they were finishing wood like that? Glass. Scrape it with glass. See? Ergonomically. Look at the bottom. Now, William Henry Holt had a habit of making very good handles, however. The handles are also made of ash, okay? If all of a sudden you're getting something and it's made out of hickory or made out of something else, forget it. It's not right, okay? Emma used ash. So we got handles like that. I'll give you another example of what we happen to have, and I want to find a good one that I can show you that goes really way down. Here's a good one. Emma, when she put the handles in these things, she ran the handle so that the handle went basically all the way to the bottom on bottom, okay? Why? That gives stability. If it was only up here, it would wobble, the bottoms would wobble, so it goes all the way down. The handles go all the way down to the bottom, all the way down like that. So it gives stability to the basket itself, okay? So we've got handles that are like this, handles that go all the way to the bottom. Most of the time it is going to have the herringbone pattern on the underside. Here's the other key, and oh, it got me into trouble one time. Remember when Stewie Stewie was a ho-chunk, and he was a ho-chunk, I'll tell you that. He could be the nastiest creature when he wanted to be. He could just really say things that were just really right on, and he said, don't, I'll share one thing. Stewie said, of course she was left-handed. What do you expect? Okay, Stewie. Which direction does a left-handed person wrap things? If you're left-handed, you wrap like this, don't you? If you're right-handed, you wrap the other way. Guess which direction they're going? They're going the direction that a left-handed person, when they were wrapping something, would wrap it. It's going in that direction. So all of a sudden, you got the horse she is ripping, and Stewie says, she's left-handed. We always knew that. What's the matter with you questioning that? Okay. So we've got that left-handed wrap. We've got handles that are always ergonomically proper. We have handles that have a patina that you don't have any other time. Okay, there's a patina that isn't like any other. You have handles that go all the way to the bottom. Okay. Now, one of the things that we will find when it comes to these baskets, color was when they took when they went out and did all of the strips that make the splats that make the basket, and you wanted to add color to it, you usually used naturally occurring things that occurred in nature for dye, like black walnut. You use black walnut, the hulls of black walnuts to dye them with. Or berry juice, the juice of strawberries, raspberries, cherries, whatever it happened to be. You would use naturally occurring dyes you could make yourself, okay? And so you'd take all of the walnut hulls in the fall of the year and put them in and stew them up and use that to dye them with. Or berry juice, or whatever it happened to be. Same way that Emma did it. She did that of naturally occurring dyes in nature. The problem is this. Because these have been exposed to light for a very long period of time, the color, you will see the color on the inside, you will see kind of colors on the inside because it's been protected. They've been protected, you know, because it hasn't been exposed to the light. So you'll end up with the color you can see on the inside, especially the ones that are the really large ones, like this one. You can see that the color is quite vibrant. See the color, that's how vibrant that color is? That's because it's always been it was originally, and this is because it's been bleached out because of light. But you can see on the inside the original color of the splats that were part of, you know, the basket. So this is a kind of a thing, you get colors, and then Stewie said, don't tell that white man. Says to me, don't tell that white man where we got that color. And I said, okay, Stewie, don't tell that white man. I think it's really funny. We finally got to the point that instead of using all of the naturally occurring dyes, it has gotten to the point that the paper mill, anybody from Wisconsin here other than Linda? All right, I know that. But they have paper mills along the Wisconsin River and all of that. And in those paper mills, when they would make the paper, they would have paper dyes. They would use a dye. Finally, the ho-chunk and other people that needed wood dye, because what is paper? It's wood pulp, okay? So you get wood pulp or paper. They would buy stains from the paper companies, then to take and color the bands that make up their baskets, okay? The splats that make up their basket. This one is pretty nice. I've seen them in the inside. They're just absolutely fantastic. You got one at home, haven't you, that's that way? Just everything, okay? And so it's this way. Another thing. Oh, you say, Landsgaard, you're full of all sorts of things. Well, another thing when it comes to these kind of handles, you'll look at it, Emma, number one, these are real made handles. Sometimes, any of you basket makers, You go to Gene Schutte and some of those people and learn how to make baskets years ago. Well, the problem is that they're run through a planer. There's no real substance to them at all. But when she put bands like this in, she made 2 holes, and she would actually, soften this and weave them through. So there were 2 holes which would anchor the handle better than just 1 hole. If that 1 hole broke, then you'd end up with the handle being completely loose from one side. So she would always have 2 holes. And she would have, again, a basket that was always properly balanced and with the left-handed twist to it. So there's a little bit of something that you're learning a little bit today, and you're also learning a little bit about those people. Ho-Chunk people are, don't tell anybody, I have to be careful. Nobody in here that can tell me. I had a funeral about 3 weeks ago, and it was the biggest Ho-Chunk funeral I've ever had in my life, because half the people that were there had Ho-Chunk background in them, were part of the people that stayed. Right, Jack? And they stayed. That's what I'm saying. That's what happened. People were everywhere. And some groups, they went on, they moved on, and some stayed in an area. Emma is buried up in Tomah, Wisconsin, and we're still working on potentially a tombstone. I still wonder if tombstones are things that they don't tend to use. They tend to take and bury and not put a tombstone up. But Emma was quite a lady. And we've remembered her with the Emma Big Bear Foundation. That is part of it, that we remember her. We celebrate her birthday the Saturday closest to the 5th of July. So if you ever want to come, the Saturday closest to the 5th of July, that is Emma Big Bear's birthday, you come to Marquette. And you come there in the, I call it, what do we call that room? Just community room in Marquette. And we will have days of showing the different things that people make and so on. I've also, one of the things that Doug and I will talk about the location of things or where things can be found. It's important that we preserve. It's important that we preserve. If you know of places that are exceedingly challenged, be very careful to preserve them, okay? All right, I'm getting the high five. Any questions? Is it all right, what I've talked about? Yes, sir.
Terry, so most of these baskets, how are you acquiring them? Where are you finding them?
Well, actually speaking, I'll tell you what Doug and I at the same thing. Doug knows how to acquire, and I know how to acquire. And you just learn people that simply potentially have them for sale. I have a few. Your old stomping ground where you grew up in Prairie du Chien is a pretty good place to walk around. If you go into the Duchamps, if you know any of the Duchamps or any of the places like that, potentially they may have one. Remember, Emma worked in that area around the river, down Marquette, McGregor, Waukon. Those are good places to find Emma baskets. If you go to the Wisconsin Dells, there are other people that made them at the Dells. Today, the Ho-Chunk are at the Dells, Tomah, Wisconsin, the Dells, and just kind of randomly other places. But primarily the Dells and up there around Tomah, Black River Falls, those kinds of places is where you'll find them. And the thing is that you're very careful about them, and there are things that we don't. I was asked one, I was in here the other day and working and getting this done, and people like to, they'll take pictures of everything, and they ask, and I just kind of look funny. You look funny, but if you get them. Folks, She died in 1968. 1968, this is 2024. She ain't gonna make no more. And if you find something that looks like this, you better pick it up if it comes available to you and you can afford it. You pick them up, you don't let them go. I got a call today. I'll give you the example. I'm supposed to do two talks in Decorah. I've got two talks to do in Decorah. And today I got on my telephone a picture of a hand-colored lithograph of one of the Sauk chiefs that they wanted to know if I'd like to have it. You bet your sweet bippy I do. You don't let them go. You better take and grab them when they come up. You better get them and hang on, okay? Any question, come up and look around. These are different. These are rugs, different. There's a lady all of a sudden would say, you want some rugs? Okay, you know, and that's what had happened. She had these rugs. She had gone a lot of time in the Southwest, and she'd pick up that. Or I've got one in here. I don't know what it is. Oh, uno momento, okay? There's a piece in this case that is made, there is a man, and I can say it around here, that's from this area. In fact, he has a child, I think, that even lives in this town, that is the most magnificent bow and arrow maker I have ever known and ever seen. Not only is he magnificent that way, his wife makes the wonderful arrows. He'd make wonderful knives. And guess what? She's actually related to at least one person in this room right now, and I won't say who he is. The man with the goatee back there. It's his cousin's husband that made it. And I will show this to you because I think it's cool. This is a necklace. And it is made of antler, and the bow comes out, and the arrows come out, and you can shoot it. You talk about cool. I think it's one of the coolest things, and he made knives that are absolutely beyond belief. Just this guy came from around here, has a son that lives in Fayette, as far as I know, unless he's moved. And that was made from around here. Guess what? He's Chippewa on his mother's side. A card-carrying Chippewa. In other words, he belongs to the tribe. And a Ho-Chunk on his wife's side. So, you see what I'm saying? It's things like that that you come across. And I bought it where? I bought it in Prairie du Chien at the Hardee's in Prairie du Chien. That's where I bought it, at the Hardee's in Prairie du Chien. So.
We thank Terry for talking today. He did a great talk.